A day without a night and a night without a day. Coming up on this episode, we're going to go over an old school recommendation, the classic from 1985, LADYHAWKE. But before we get into it, remember to go into the description and click on the link for a free epic fantasy book. And remember to subscribe and follow and share this YouTube channel so you can get more great content, all right? Let's do it. Welcome back to Great Stories Change the World. This is the YouTube channel where a science fiction fantasy author, that's me, goes over movies, books, TV shows, different kinds of media to talk about why that story is great. Because I do believe that great stories change the world and great stories have impact, so I want to help us tell great stories. So today on my YouTube channel, we're going to talk about a classic. At least it's a classic to me, and it's called LADYHAWKE. Now, a lot of people may not know this movie. It wasn't a huge hit. In fact, I don't think it was a hit at all in the mid-'80s. But it's got some great elements, and it's one of my all-time favorites. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, as it were. It's not a great movie. It's not one of those like epics where it's just a perfect movie. It's got some issues here and there. But I really want us to look at 3 reasons why this movie, LADYHAWKE, is a great one to watch and a great lesson for us in great storytelling, okay? So first of all, LADYHAWKE was an idea by a director by the name of Richard Donner, and he had done things a little bit before, and later on he became a whole lot more popular because he did the Lethal Weapon movies, he did Goonies, and he did a couple other things, Conspiracy Theory, and so he's a great like action director, but he had this idea and he had this script of a fantasy movie, and he kind of kept trying to get it done, and finally he got it made, and it came out in 1985. Now, there's a couple main characters in the movie, and Kurt Russell was going to play the main hero. Now, you may know Kurt Russell from some modern things. He plays Santa Claus in a kind of a cool, Santa Chronicles movie. But he was, Escape from New York in the 80s. And so, he was kind of a big name through the 70s and early 80s. And he's done a whole bunch of great stuff. And I love Kurt Russell. But when Kurt Russell maybe read the script, or he's kind of started to get involved and started to see what exactly kind of movie this was going to be, he backed out. So they had to find somebody to replace him, and they got Rutger Hauer. Now, Rutger Hauer was famous for Blade Runner, and he did a great movie that I love called The Hitcher. Again, one that probably a lot of people don't know, but it was a great movie. And then there are 2 other cast members that they got. One was Matthew Broderick, and he hadn't done Ferris Bueller yet, but he had done War Games and some other things. And Michelle Pfeiffer. So Michelle Pfeiffer is the 3rd sort of main cast member. And these 3 people really carry the movie. So this is the reason, number 1, you should watch this movie, is that the cast are amazing. The cast are phenomenal, and they do such a great job. Some of the dialogue is clunky, especially with Matthew Broderick. It kind of really borders on what we say is anachronistic. He's more of an 80s teenager at times, but they really kind of fix that with kind of his sarcasm being towards God. So he's a thief, and he just escapes from the dungeon, and he's really mostly self-interested. But he seems like he's got a good heart, and Matthew Broderick plays that really well, as if he's a good-hearted guy. And again, this whole conversation that he's having with God, where he's like making deals with God and then going back on the deals, like there's a lot of that's fun and funny, and it really gives the movie a lot of heart. And Matthew Broderick as the mouse, or Philippe, there's a lot of French names in here. He's kind of the main character in a sense. He's the narrator, at least. But the story's not really about him. It's about this other couple, a dashing, sort of dark, brooding hero played by Rutger Hauer. And that's Captain Navarre. And he's your swordsman. He's your competent fighter. There's some cliche moments in this movie, some cliche characters, but again, there's some really important things to look at. But Rutger Hauer does a great job, and of course, you can see that from his portrayal and some other things, kind of that stoic sort of person. But he does a great job. And you have Michelle Pfeiffer. Now, Michelle Pfeiffer hadn't done a whole lot yet either. Now, she had done Scarface, which was a huge hit, and she had a part in Scarface. And then she did this little movie that I guess was kind of a hit, but they made a sequel to Grease. And so she was in Grease too, and she sings a great song that I loved as a kid, Cool Rider. So I knew Michelle Pfeiffer. As a kid, I didn't know her from Scarface because I didn't watch that movie until I was older, rated R and all the violence. But I did see her in Cool Rider because my mom loved the Grease movies and musicals, so I knew her from there. And she is just amazing in this movie. Like her character, her portrayal, you can just tell she's a star, right? She's one of those performances, kind of like with Scarface, not as much with Grease too, but one of those portrayals where you're like, man, given the chance, she's beautiful, she's got great acting chops, and she does a great job. So the characters who play play these characters are really amazing, and they're kind of archetypes in a sense. They're really archetypes of like the thief, the Matthew Broderick character Philippe. He's like the thief, the kind of the rogue kind of guy. He's kind of out for himself, but he's a good-hearted guy and very neutral in a lot of ways. But he plays that sort of archetype really well. And then, like I said, you have the brooding sort of cliche. I can beat anybody as a swordsman. I'm competent, but he's also a tortured soul. We'll get to some of that in a moment. And then you have Michelle Pfeiffer, who's also somewhat of a tortured soul, but she has these, and they have these cool interactions, both of them with Matthew Broderick. And it's actually a good storytelling technique. And we'll go over this with the cast in the sense that, so here's the setup for the movie, is that there's these two people who fell in love. Isabeau, who is Michelle Pfeiffer's character, and Captain Navarre. They fall in love, but this bishop, priest guy turns to evil, makes a deal with the devil, and he's in love with Isabeau, supposedly, but he's very possessive, and he's very jealous of this love interest between Captain Navarre and Isabeau, and so he curses them. So by day, Isabeau is an eagle, and by night, Captain Navarre is a wolf. So they can never actually be together. They can kind of see each other for a split second, in the transition from day to night, but they can never really be together. And so you can't really see them interact. So you have to have these characters interact with somebody. And so as a writing sort of tool, they put this great character in between them. And so he acts as this go-between, and you have his relationship with Captain Navarre, which is different than his relationship with Isabeau. And it actually works. The movie, it might be a little too long. They kind of throw in a couple convoluted elements here and there to kind of stretch out the movie a little bit. But the movie really works. The setup is a great sort of fantasy setup. It's very simple. You've got a clear villain. You've got a clear hero. And of course, for the hero, for Captain Navarre, his only sort of thought is, I'm just going to kill this guy. He's cursed us. We'll never be together. We're tortured. It's hopeless. And since I'm a man of honor and he's this evil villain, at least I'll kill him, and there'll be some sense of justice there. Of course, as they go through the movie, they find out some other things. But it's a great setup, great characters, and like I said, the cast is amazing, and the script leaves a little to be desired here and there. But let's get into reason number two, because reason number two is the theme of the masculine and the feminine relating to one another. So again, these are archetypes, and it's not quite cliche, but they're kind of archetypes, prototypes of the masculine and the feminine. And the reason why this is awesome is because this is a universal element to kind of tap into as a writer. Men and women want to be together. They do. Like, I mean, how many love stories do we have? Even in action flicks, the guy has a love interest, right? There's a universal longing for romance, for connection between men and women, and yet what we see is they have a really hard time doing that because men and women are very different. And what you see in a lot of stories, in a lot of these great stories that people love and connect with, is the masculine is important, but left alone without the balance of the feminine, he's too angry, he's too strong. He's supposed to be strong, a protector, and that's kind of the masculine sort of idea, the positive masculine idea, right? He's a protector, he's a hero, he's someone who saves the weak, like Navarre does at one point with Philippe, and he's in control of his strength in a certain sense, but he needs to be balanced with something softer, right? He needs to be balanced with someone who shows him what life is really about, right? And that's the kind of the feminine side that needs to balance the masculine, right? They're meant to work together, but so often because they're so different, this feminine side, which is about family, which is about love, which is about all of these issues of connection and kind of the circle of life sort of thing, right? That's an archetype of the feminine. So she is an eagle, and her animal sort of symbol is an eagle. His animal symbol is a wolf, right? He's dark, and his comes out at night, and hers comes out in the day, right? There's this sort of yin yang sort of thing, but ultimately, our heart's desire as humans is for these two things to work together, because we know that the masculine softened by the feminine, and the feminine strengthened by the masculine, right? Because the masculine doesn't dominate her; he actually empowers her, right? That's how these two are supposed to work. It's like his strength is supposed to empower her, and her softness and her affection and all that sort of idea is supposed to make him fight for what's real and right and true. And that's why that's kind of an archetype in a lot of those, and a cliche to a certain degree in a lot of those action movies, right? Because just alone, men can be just wrong, but you put a woman in the mix and they act differently, right? And they should. And so that's sort of the idea here that they're really playing with, that a man and a woman really are in love and they really want to connect, but it seems impossible for them to connect. And that's a universal theme that they're playing with on a fantasy level. Like, then they feel like they've been cursed. And I think we can all relate to this, right? We can all relate to this idea of, I want to have a partner that completes me, right? To use another phrase from a romantic comedy, right? I want to have a partner who completes me, but it seems like it's all fraught with falling over ourselves, and it's just not working, and we don't communicate well, and it's like we're speaking a different language, and men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and that whole idea, as much as maybe some modern people may not appreciate the sort of difference between the masculine and the feminine, it is still a universal sort of idea, and they're playing with it to show that when truth comes to light, then they get to be together. Then that's the reward of truth. And that's the third reason. So the third reason to watch this movie and to learn from this movie is the second theme. It's my third reason, but it's the second theme of the movie. And the other main theme of the movie is truth, is things coming into the light and people telling the truth. Okay, so this is really what all stories are about, and yet they kind of play with it in a more obvious way in LADYHAWKE. So all stories are about lies and truth. So if people live by a lie, then they are miserable, and they don't and they're not satisfied, and there's longing, and there's violence, and there's evil and all this sort of stuff. So people living not according to the truth, whether they just misunderstand or they just don't know any better, they're ignorant, or whether they're choosing it, bad things happen, right? And that's a tragedy. A tragedy is when the people, the main character especially, is given the opportunity to come to the truth and come to the light and be transformed into who he or she was meant to be, or if they don't do that, that's a tragedy, because they just end up broken, and that's the end of the movie, is that they don't choose that. But in this movie, Philippe lies a lot. So the Matthew Broderick character, he lies a lot, and he kind of has this dialogue, like I said, going with God. And he's like, hey, you know me, I'm going to lie, God. I said I would tell the truth, but that's not who I am. But as his character transforms throughout the movie, he gets pulled into their story. He gets pulled into this epic tension and story and curse and fantasy. He gets pulled into this story at some point against his will, but at some point he chooses to be a part of the story. And then he starts telling the truth, and he starts kind of talking with God about, well, I told the truth and something bad still happened. I'm never going to tell the truth again. So there's this whole idea of telling the truth and things coming to light. And what you see at the end is that he becomes a truth teller instead of a liar. The Matthew Broderick character comes more to telling the truth, and at the same time, the way to break the curse, which keeps men and women apart, the way to break the curse is to bring it all into the light. Is for to take advantage of the one moment in time where there's vulnerability, where they are equals, where they are together and they can see one another, really view one another. Like, all of these symbols that are going on at the end of the movie are very powerful symbols. And when you and that's why it's very romantic. It's men and women like it, because this is the longing of our hearts. Like, this is a human longing, right? We want to be seen as we are. So some people may only relate to us in our animal forms, right? That's the fantasy sort of thing going on here, but we want to be seen for who we really are, as a complete person, and appreciated and loved for who we really are. And that's the reward that you see at the end of the movie, is that when everything comes to light and the truth is known to the villain and to the people, when the truth is known, then you have a reward. You have satisfaction. You have the thing you were longing for, which is that connection, which is that intimacy and the affection and being seen and being known as you really are, right? So those are the three reasons why you should watch this movie. And I've tried not to give any major spoilers here. Obviously, there's somewhat of a happy ending, so you can kind of watch it. But if you can rent it from Apple TV, or I think it's like $3 or $4, you can rent it on streaming. I have it on DVD, but you can rent it on streaming for $3 or $4. It's totally worth it if you're a writer, if you're an author, if you're a fantasy fan. As much as there might be some cliches and some clunky dialogue writing here and there, it's well worth the watch to see the power of storytelling and the symbolism that as you get to the end, you find the sort of things we all long for, these universal themes that make stories great. So that's it for this episode. Remember to go into the description and click on the link for a free ebook, a free fantasy ebook, if you like that sort of thing, like LADYHAWKE. And also subscribe to this channel so you can get more great content, and we can talk more and all that sort of stuff. All right. So peace out.